All right, let's dive into one of the most urgent and honestly fascinating social challenges happening anywhere in the world right now: South Korea's demographic crisis. And this isn't just a story about numbers on a chart, it's about the incredibly personal choices millions of people are making every single day. Choices shaped by culture, work, and the very future of their nation. So let's start with this single number, because it's at the heart of everything: 0.72. That was South Korea's total fertility rate in 2023. Now, to put that in perspective, a country needs a rate of 2.1 kids per woman just to keep its population from shrinking. So 0.72, that's not just low, it's staggeringly low. In fact, it's the lowest fertility rate on the planet, and it's not even close. So that begs the big question, right? How on earth did a country that's such a modern economic powerhouse get to this point? Well, the reasons are really complex, and they go right to the very core of what it means to live and work in Korean society today. Now, before we get into the why this is happening, we've got to understand the stakes. What does this actually mean for the country? Because this isn't some far-off problem for our grandkids to deal with. The effects are starting to show right now. I mean, just think about it for a second. Fewer babies being born today means a much smaller workforce down the road, and that smaller group of workers has to support a huge, aging population. That puts an absolutely crushing strain on things like pensions and healthcare. It's a real threat to the incredible economic growth that's defined modern Korea. So what's driving all this? Well, when you look at the research from big organizations like the OECD, one theme keeps coming up again and again. It's this deep, fundamental conflict between the country's incredibly demanding work culture and the simple realities of raising a family. And this right here, this puts some hard numbers to that idea. On average, Koreans work almost 150 hours more every year than people in other developed countries. That's nearly 4 extra full-time work weeks. This culture of working incredibly long hours creates a pretty basic problem. When is there ever time to raise a child? And if that wasn't enough, there's another major factor at play: the gender pay gap. It's not just a little high in Korea, it is literally the highest in the OECD, more than double the average. This economic reality creates this immense pressure, often on women, to be the one to step back from a career if a choice has to be made between work and family. Yeah, and this quote from an OECD report really hits the nail on the head. They talk about the motherhood penalty. That's basically all the career setbacks and financial losses that women face after they have kids. In a society as competitive as South Korea, this isn't just some vague risk. For many, it feels like a guaranteed outcome, forcing a choice that feels totally impossible. And this imbalance, it doesn't just happen at work, it follows women home. Look at this breakdown. On a daily basis, women in Korea are doing more than 3.5 times as much unpaid work, we're talking childcare, cooking, cleaning, as men. It's basically like working a full-time second shift after you've already finished a long day at your paying job. Okay, so with a picture this grim, you have to ask, what's being done about it? Well, the government isn't just sitting back. There's a huge policy push to try and change things, and a lot of that focus is on the very first years of a child's life. You're going to hear this acronym a lot when we talk about solutions: ECEC. It stands for Early Childhood Education and Care. And this is really the cornerstone of the whole strategy: building a strong, reliable public system that can support families from day one. So this ECEC idea boils down to a pretty clear 4-part blueprint. First, just pump more public money into childcare. Second, make being a childcare worker a better job with better training and better pay. Third, make absolutely sure that these services are cheap enough and close enough for everyone to use. And finally, bring it all together into one unified system so it's not a confusing mess for parents. But it's not just about daycare, right? The plan is bigger than that. It's also about things like actively encouraging dads to take parental leave, pushing companies to offer more flexible work options, and trying to tackle the sky-high cost of private tutoring and after-school programs that put so much financial stress on families. So there's a plan on paper. Sounds good, right? But, and this is a big but, putting all of this into practice is a whole other story. The road ahead is absolutely full of challenges that money and policy alone might not be able to fix. And this chart really gives you a reality check. Yeah, Korea is spending more on early childcare, but as a piece of its total economy, it's still lagging behind the OECD average. And it's way behind the countries that are really leading the way on this. There's still a pretty big gap between the ambition and the actual investment. And honestly, this right here might be the heart of the entire problem. It's the toughest challenge of all. You can build all the childcare centers you want, you can change the laws on parental leave, but shifting these really deep-seated cultural ideas about work, about career, and about who does what at home, that is a much, much slower process. All right, so let's just quickly recap what we've walked through. We started with the crisis, that shocking 0.72 number. Then we looked at the cause, this brutal clash between work and family, especially for women. We saw the big policy response, which is all about ECCE. And finally, we've landed on the biggest hurdle of all, the fact that policy is one thing, but changing a culture is another. And so it all comes down to this one massive question. Can new laws and new investments and new government programs actually be powerful enough to reshape the very culture that created this crisis in the first place? The entire future of South Korea could very well hang on the answer.